Hey guys, Barry William Magadidi here from the Comeback Game podcast, back with another episode today. I've got Dr. Andrew Knight from Ascending Health, who is a facilitator of human neural organization for the last 25 years. Andrew is very passionate about human neurology and how within human beings it can become disorganized and lead to poor health and performance, and really wants to kind of share around how we can have the key solutions to regain health integrity in the modern age. Dr. Andrew Knight, how you doing today?
Hi, Barry. Very well, thanks.
That's good. Mate, let's just kick off for the people that are watching and listening to this today from wherever they are in the world. Do you want to just share a little bit about you and what it is that you do?
Sure, Barry, thanks. I'm a chiropractor, qualified chiropractor. I've been practicing for more than 25 years. And recently I have had the opportunity to teach chiropractors about the developments of what we're about, particularly the brain and the central nervous system, and how our modern age, this day and age, a lot of the stresses that we accumulate or are subjected to traumatize our bodies in a way that diminishes our health and our ability to get well, have a properly functioning immune system, have properly functioning relationships with our significant others, and those sort of impacts. They're more intangible than used to be. It used to be that we dealt mostly with neck pain, back pain, headaches, those sort of things. But in my practice in this day and age, I'm seeing more and more clients coming to me with anxiety-related issues or other forms of ill health that they want attention for, and that's where we're going with this new science, if you like.
Yeah, can you share a little bit around what the knock methodology is? Because like a lot of people would relate to chiropractors as the old kind of whack and crack.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, like many years ago when I had some severe spinal issues, I tried all different types of practitioners, and one that really didn't sit well with me was the traditional chiropractic, the whack and crack approach. I felt that there was just something about it that didn't quite feel right in my body. And upon exploring, I came across network care, which is more of a soft touch form of chiropractic. And what you guys do in the knock methodology is very different. So could you explain to people around, like out there, what is the knock process?
Sure. Not NOT or a neural organization technique started out for me when I first graduated, and it was quite overwhelming, but I practiced for many years as a mechanical based chiropractor. I like to call it mechanical based because it views the body as a machine of parts which can be realigned, and misalignments cause ill health, and interference of the nerve system is basically the central premise. And as I developed in my practice, I found that it fell short. I worked in country WA for many years, 15 years, and it suited the client base that I had there. Were very mechanically minded, and if it didn't make a noise, you didn't do anything. So I found that when I moved to Melbourne, I had a whole raft of people who were very well informed, and knowledgeable about other types of care, particularly acupuncture and kinesiology and massage, and neural organization brings a lot of that knowledge on board with the way we approach the central nervous system. And probably the best model we can use, moving away from the industrial model and the mechanical models, is the information technology model, whereas the brain and the central nervous system is it's kind of insulting to call it a computer, because it's so much more than that. It's a self-healing and self-repairing mega computer, and damage and drops to it. Everybody has a phone. They understand the concept and the metaphor now when we explain the neurology as part of what goes on in your mobile phone. For instance, if you drop it, you're going to have problems with it. You might have to replace the screen, but you might have to load up the apps that have been affected or outdated, or you might have to upload more relevant applications to your particular needs. And that's where we're going with the approach that we take nowadays. We're trying to explain to clients and chiropractors alike. That's our model.
It's really interesting because, we look at the way that doctors prescribed prescriptions for years around certain things. And one thing that I've noticed on my own journey through, to human potential and human excellence is that everything is interconnected. What I'd love to know is, like, what do you feel is the connection between ill health, body, muscles, the way that we're functioning, and limiting beliefs? Like, is there any connection, in your opinion, between the emotional and the psychological things that us as human beings are carrying? And we're all carrying it, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. We're all preconditioned from early ages right through into early adulthood. What is the connection for you between, limiting beliefs and more around that psychological aspects and the body?
It's very clear, and the scientists are telling us more and more information about it all the time, that the thought process produces neurotransmitters and neuropeptides, and those very powerful chemicals are released by the neurons in the brain in response to trauma, but also in response to pleasure as well. Mm. And a constant production of those neurotransmitters produces then stronger chemicals in the body, like corticoids and adrenaline. And people who have been exposed to a lot of trauma, whether it be physical or emotional trauma, have that chemistry in their whole body, and it pre-wires the body's construction and behavior to those stress chemicals. So emotions and limiting beliefs that stem from those traumas are embedded in the chemistry of the body, and those cells that are immersed in that chemistry, they grow in a certain way. It even affects the genetic triggers that sometimes the genetic coding is triggered by certain chemical states. The scientists are telling that more and more. So as a practitioner, it's about retraining the body's systems to nurture a place of stability and growth, rather than response to trauma over time and the fight-flight response stimulated, creating stress hormones and making people jumpy, angry, irritable, and affecting their limiting beliefs in a way that is preconditioned. So for sure.
So do you believe then, based on that there's possibility that we're carrying physical illness or physical pain in our body that are a result of limiting beliefs and experiences we had as in our childhood?
Well, it certainly influences it. It's a broad stroke of the brush to make a direct link, but I guess that through the understanding we get from our environment, when we are traumatized in a certain way, we'll avoid we'll avoid that trauma. So we'll make up and judge that environmental situation in a way that it causes us pleasure or pain to move us away or towards things. So that then reinforces the belief about it. If you were trapped underneath your beanbag by your big brother when you were growing up, you'll avoid unpleasant situations like closed spaces from then on. It'll be part of your pre-wiring, not only because of a limiting belief, but because it triggers a chemistry in your system. You'll think about a closed space, and your neuropeptides and neurotransmitters will trigger your adrenal response, and that's an unpleasant situation. So you'll move away from it.
And is it possible then that, like, going through the knock process, like, obviously you're noticing patterning within the body that is possibly not in alignment with normal or high functioning? Is it possible then, through working through the body, you're able to actually clear these emotional states at the same time?
Yeah, we have a way of measuring those responses in the body quite simply and quite reliably by generally asking the body to perform functions in certain ways, and then detecting inability to perform those functions equally or under a stressful situation. And then we set about reprogramming, if you like, through various techniques of contact, reprogramming those automated responses which come from the belief state. So it's not often on a conscious level. It's more of a Pavlovian response, if you can understand that, where you ring the dogs were conditioned to eat food when the bell was rung. And then they took away the food and the bell was rung and they still ran to the bowl to eat food. So in a way, our subconscious minds are preconditioned to that.
Yeah.
And we can get into those tests and those functional states, and we can reprogram them reasonably quickly within a matter of weeks to months.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I found, like we've been doing some work together, and one thing that I found from my personal experience is that, you know, I've worked actively on myself and on my inner game for a long time. Inner game being, you know, belief systems, value structures, thought patterning, and also energetically, spiritually, alignment with self and with calling. And one thing that I noticed significantly is that I had this experience where, although I'd made so many changes internally, there was almost an aspect of me that I felt I hadn't embodied those changes into my physiology, into the way that I actually held myself, and the way that I presented myself, and the way that I walked, and the way that I moved, until I started working with you. It almost unlocked in me these changes that had already been made, but hadn't yet manifested at a physical form.
Yeah, we integrated them. You've done a lot of work, and I find a lot of clients of mine who've done the pre-work, they've been ready to make changes, and they've been held up by a physiological block. We can help to break down that physiological block within their subconscious processing, just from the terms of unlocking their fight state, disarming their primitive responses to fear and anxiety, and then by rebuilding the basic building blocks of stability, which is how you stand, how you respond against gravity, standing on one foot, how you process things at night with your eyes closed is completely different to how you process them with your eyes open, because neurologically we receive a lot of information through our eyes, and you turn that off, and so all of a sudden you have to rely simply on proprioceptive ability, and that's tricky for some. It's not asking you to ride a skateboard at night with your eyes closed or anything, but it'll certainly test you.
Yeah. And that was definitely something that was quite significant for me is the understanding of how our body can function. The same function responds differently tonight to today. Yep. That was a big thing. And obviously being able to integrate and amend those two different states to be able to both function at a high level.
Yeah. And we can detect those changes in your physiology by just simply asking you to do the same tests, but just close your eyes or do them at nighttime. And then we can discover a whole raft of subconscious processing that's been going on while you've been sleeping. A lot of people don't sleep well because they're in a fight state they've carried over. Yeah. And so integrating that is very important.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I want to change gears, I suppose, just to have you share a little bit about your journey so far. Like, what has been some challenges or some hurdles that you've had to overcome in your journey in not only what you do within the NOT methodology and chiropractic, but as a business owner, entrepreneur as well? Like, you've been in the game for a while now. If you look back in your life, like, what were some of the biggest challenges that you actually had to face and overcome to be where you are today?
I think one of the biggest ones was after we finished our degree, 6-year degree in my case, that we were kind of under the impression that we would open the doors and there would be a queue down the street for our services, and that took a while to change. And a lot, we weren't taught a lot about business or any of those skills, so we had to go out and learn them, as well as looking after people. It became quite overloading, and eventually being in a practice on my own in the country, away from my colleagues and peers who supported me through that time, became too much of a load, and I burned out. Had to look for other options as how to run a business more successfully. So I shopped around my services around the globe for about 10 years or little under, and realized I actually did a pretty good job of what I did initially, but it was time to give back. And learning and teaching chiropractors now in what I do is giving me much more reward. I still look after clients as well, but the rewards to train colleagues is amazing. Yeah. It's what I still have to keep practicing to keep my hand in the game, but it's wonderful to teach people who are helping others.
I guess it's that feeling of being able to make an impact far beyond just the clients that you see weekly. Is that every chiropractor that you're taking through this methodology and that you're sharing and you're teaching and you're helping them to upskill, they've got the ability to each impact hundreds, if not thousands, of clients themselves, as well as a result of the training that you're providing them.
That's right. So my reach if I can teach chiropractors to do and upskill them and to be part of their continuing professional development. I'd much rather do that as well as look after the one-on-one, because I still enjoy the face-to-face interaction, and that it makes me smile at the end of the day when I've helped some people get through some stuff. It's really very, very rewarding.
Yeah. What do you reckon the biggest mistake was that you made in business in all your years? Like, you look back, what was the mistake that you feel caused you the most amount of pain, but possibly also caused you the biggest breakthrough as well?
Gosh, in business, I had a
pretty
good run. I probably think that holding on to the good when the going was good was probably, I didn't have a succession plan. I had a succession plan, but because business was going so well and I was enjoying it so much, I got lost in the business of doing the business and forgot to look up and see what was to become of me later, like now. So it took a long time. It took 5 years to recover from that realization that I probably on-sold my business probably 3 or 4 years too late, when I was already a little bit overloaded and a little bit jaded, and then had to rapidly get out of it before I did something not so, wise to myself and others. So
would you say there's an aspect of complacency in that?
I don't think I had the right advice. I think I was out doing my own thing, getting no advice, basically, no business advice. And trying to make it up as I go along, looking at other people's models, looking at based upon, I guess. And one of the realizations I had towards the end of that practice career was that there were 3 or 4 of my colleagues who died or were killed at the end of their career when they were just looking forward to their retirement. And there was 2 suicides from close friends of mine, which just seemed such a shock. Yeah. So this wasn't just me that was feeling overloaded and overpressurized, but it was across the board. And when I reached out and looked out there was a lot of my colleagues were at that point, at that tipping point of like, why am I doing this? So yeah, I think that was the biggest shock that made me look up and go, hang on a minute, is this really what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? There's got to be more to this. So yeah, that was probably a catalyst.
It's interesting how life, like something that I often say is that your business will always be broken. And I think that life is constantly squeezing us to continue growth. And it's like, we're either green and growing or we're up and rotting. And I just see this aspect when we get a bit too complacent or get a bit too safe, or maybe coast along, life tends to kind of throw these opportunities for us to recalibrate and to, in many ways, consciously choose whether or not we want to keep going down the same path we're going down, or whether we want to consciously choose to go down some other path. What do you feel like was the best, 1 to 3 bits of advice that you ever received off like a mentor, a friend, a colleague? What were the 3 bits of advice to you that are kind of stuck with you?
Well, probably the first piece of advice when I first went into business, when I was so young and green out of uni, was that I had to start as I wanted to finish. So I set up my business structure from the get-go with some advice, and that carried me through for probably 15 years just on that business structure alone. And some of the decisions I made at that stage paid dividends later on, investment strategy and business professional development wise. Yeah. I think another piece of advice which was given to me by a friend of mine who was a colleague and a good friend since high school. He said, "Don't give up your profession, mate. Give up everything else, but you're a good chiropractor. Stick with it." So I think staying within your industry was a very important aspect for me. And there's so many variants of what I could do. From running a big multi-doctor practice with many staff in regional WA to doing locum work across the globe in Italy and France, and toying with the idea of teaching, and then moving into a teaching position, not in a university sense, but in a facilitator role with another organisation, a neural organisation technique. Going to seminars. There's so much scope within my field of profession that I didn't have to throw away my profession and I actually worked for a month in a winery, and I worked for a friend of mine who had an excavator and a house demolition business, just to see what those industries were like. And I'm glad I stuck. I'm kind of glad I stuck with these, because they still give me a great deal of joy. And I don't want to be elbow deep in an excavator up to my elbows in grease, knocking down someone's old home. Thanks very much. Yeah. But or walking around a vineyard in the pouring rain, tying down vines just to get paid in industry discount. It was enticing. But no, I think sticking in your industry is key. Setting up how you start is to how you want to finish. Setting that up first, and just being persistent. Persistent.
So start with the end in mind. Great bit of advice. Stick within your industry or within your niche, and persistency pays off.
When you're at the end of your rope, just tie a knot and hold on.
I love that. And like if we were able to jump in a time machine right now and we're able to go back and visit the 10-year-old version of you, right? What advice would you give him, knowing what you know now? What advice would you give that 10-year-old version of you?
Never get rid of your bike.
Motorbike?
I know. I used to tinker with push bikes at that stage. And then when I became 15, 16, I got my first motorbike, and I've always had bikes, and that's where I get my most joy, riding with my friends, whether it be the 2 weeks around Tasmania or a couple of tours of not tours of duty, but motorcycle tours of Cambodia, riding on the weekend with another group of friends. Just my life and my happiness revolves around riding bikes, and so I'd say, see that bike, just keep that one. Probably I get the most joy out of that.
Do you find that having that hobby allows you to kind of stay inspired in your work, and allows you to bring energy to your work, having that off time?
Well, I've got a few of my bikes that actually sit out the back of my practice right now. So the occasional waft of fuel is one of the bikes I'm working on drips a bit of fuel, but I've got I think I've got five bikes now, and I think one of them's working. But the rest are in various states of maintenance and repair.
Nice. I suppose next is like, what advice, or what would you share to anybody watching, listening to this today that is in business, because most of the listeners are business owners, entrepreneurs that may be going through some challenges right now, or maybe have some current issues with their health and their well-being. Like, what advice would you share with them?
I've got to thank you for the invitation to do a webinar with you, but I've been putting together that kind of a bridge between what people experience in their world and what I teach chiropractors in the professional world. And I guess that it's just the ability to identify your state is the key message within that. Is if you don't know what state you're in, you can't change it. And if you're in a fight-flight state, and you're defensive and you're snapping at your spouse, or you're being aggressive, or just intolerant of your staff, you're in a fight-flight state. You need to recognize that so you can move out of that and work at reducing that fight-flight in whatever way possible. We can help you with that. But there are many ways: meditation, exercise, just going bushwalking, that sort of stuff. Just removing yourself from the state, the environment that creates that state. Then look at whether your stability, whether you're stable in your life, whether you feel safe and secure. That's the next stage before we can move to growth. And then when we're looking at growing, how your systems are going, one of the examples is that you can't digest your food. Your digestive system a lot of people are smashing down the shakes, and they're taking the greens, and they're doing all that sort of stuff, and their body's not in a state to actively absorb the nutrients they're pouring into their body, because the alarm state is produced cortisol and shut down the digestive system function. So all of that nutrient is just going to waste. It basically ferments or it rots in your digestive system, and you can't absorb the nutrients. So getting your priorities about getting out of fight flight, being stable and enjoying your food so that you can absorb the nutrients out of it to create healthy immunity, to create healthy hormone balance, to be joyful. That's really where you need to be, is a self-awareness. It's awareness of where you are. And so I think that's probably what people could take home from like this message, is that there is help for you, but you need to know where you're at.
And you need to be willing to do something about it as well. I think that's often something I see a lot, is people just haven't got the awareness that there's something else other than what they're experiencing, because what they experienced for so long that it's become normal. And
if people are watching this, they're looking for the change. They're ready to reach out and to ask for help and to get the change. Whereas the people that aren't watching are stuck in a bubble. So it's of their own delusions. So that it's up for those people to identify their friends and their colleagues and say, hey mate, you're in fight flight state. You're a bit angry today. What's going on? So there's that interconnection that role that we have to play, that responsibility that we have to have for others, not just us who are watching the podcast and changing and being proactive and responsible. We have to look to the person next to us and say, mate, there's no need to go off. There's no need to beat your horn in traffic. We're going to get there.
Yeah.
Just chill. And you might need some help with that. And I've got just the guy.
Yeah. So if any of the viewers or listeners are listening, watching this today, that are from Melbourne or Australia, willing to travel, I highly recommend that you get in to see Dr. Andrew Knight, because he will honestly blow your mind with not only his expertise, but the way that he is able to unlock your body in new ways you never thought possible. Dr. Andrew, like, how can the people get in contact with you? How can the Comeback Nation get in contact with you?
Thanks, Barry. The best way is I have an entry portal on the web. So it's www.ascendinghealth.com.au. You have to put the AU at the end, otherwise you end up in Florida. So there is another Ascending Health, but it's in the US. So we've got the .com.au address, and you just make a booking. There's a booking button there, and you can just make a booking and make a time. And then I'm happy to run through a protocol assessment of you and see where your help would be best fit.
Yeah, awesome. Dr. Andrew, mate, thank you so much for your time today and for all that you've shared. For those of you watching, listening, please put any comments or questions you've got below, and Dr. Andrew will be more than happy to answer those. But equally too, if you think that there's someone around you right now that's maybe a bit irritable and you think might need a bit of a hand, my recommendation might be to tag them or share this with them, so that they might be able to get that subtle hint that there's something they can do to move past their irritability. But Dr. Andrew, mate, it's been a pleasure having you on. I really appreciate it for your time.
Thank you very much, Barry. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, mate.